Hi, guys. Are you excited for another bedtime story? I hope you are, because this story is actually one of my favorites again. And it has a lot of different versions that some people have heard. It's a folktale from back in Persia. And, but this one, I want to go into a little bit more detail, and we might need to split it up in different parts. So let's go. This is the story of AliBaba and the 40 Thieves. Once upon a time, in the land of Persia, there lived two brothers, Qasim and Ali Baba. After their father died, they divided the wealth, which wasn't that much to begin with, and they kind of went on their way living their lives. A lot of it got spent over time, but what Kasim, the older brother, what he did that was smart for him was that he married rich, a woman whose father was a rich merchant. Whereas Ali Baba, on the other hand, he married someone who was less than well off, and basically he married someone poor, and he didn't have the same stroke of luck like his brother did. For instance, his brother Kasim, when he married this rich woman and his father-in-law died, he ended up with a significant amount of wealth that he overtook as part of the business. So what Kasim did was, he is a merchant. He sold all kinds of extravagant goods, precious and rare items, and costly things. And he became known as a wealthy man in their town. They actually lived next door to each other, but Kasim's house was much bigger than Ali Baba's. So life obviously seemed to be a little bit more tough for Ali Baba, and he would make a living by collecting firewood and sap and oil and these kinds of things from the nearby jungle. And he would bring those back into town to sell. And he didn't have much, but he had 3 donkeys that he would use to help carry the loads back and forth between the jungle and the town. So one day, when Ali Baba was in the jungle, he saw a dust cloud rising in the distance. It appeared as if a large gathering of horsemen were racing in his general direction. It is never a good sign if you see a group of unmarked men and their horses racing towards you. Usually, these men in his town, the stories would go that these men would have ill intentions of robbing or killing, and no law was ever able to catch them. So he thought he would surely be slain if these horsemen found him, and his donkeys would be driven off, and these bandits would definitely just kill him. So he grabbed his donkeys as reins and started out quickly to get away from their trajectory. He hurried as fast as he could, scared to death as he ran. He realized that as he was running, that he was approaching the end of the jungle, a path that he'd never seen before. So he quickly hid his donkeys behind some bushes and climbed up the tallest tree in that area and prayed to God he wouldn't be spotted by any of them. To his shock, when he was up on the tree, the horsemen galloped to his area, and all of them stopped just short of where he was high above in that tree. They unmounted in front of the boulders by the edge of the forest, and these boulders were at the foot of a small mountain in that forest. So they were in total 40 of them, he counted. All of them were dressed in black and wore turbans and face coverings. They all started to unload large bags that were saddled on their horses. Ali Baba pegged them to be highway robbers who were notorious for using force to rob caravans or travelers or anybody with any wealthy possessions. It looked as if they had bags and bags of booty. The guy in the front, which Ali Baba assumed to be the leader of this group of horsemen, said in a loud and firm voice the words, "Open sesame!" And lo and behold, the boulders rolled gracefully to each side, and an entrance into the cave appeared. What magic is this? This is something that Ali Baba's eyes couldn't believe. And one by one, these masked horsemen, they filled into the cave carrying their bags, followed at the end by their chief leader who said the words "Open Sesame" before. Before walking in, this chief looked back and glanced around to see if there was any audience. And satisfied that nobody was around, he walked in, and the boulders rolled back into their initial place, and no one was any wiser that there was a secret cave here. Obviously, their horses were still parked outside, but as far as anybody could tell, not a soul in sight, a human soul. So AliBaba kept waiting on top of the tree because if they went in and left behind their horses outside this cave, then there couldn't have been an exit elsewhere. Otherwise, they would have taken their horses inside. And just as surely, a few moments later, the boulders rolled open again, where each of the horsemen filled out with their commander being the last again. And he turned around to the boulders and he said in a strong voice, "Shut sesame!" And the boulders obeyed his command to seal the entrance to this cave. These men then all mounted back on their horses and began to ride away. AliBaba, scared at what he just saw, remained on top of this tree for longer because he wasn't sure that they would return and make a surprise on him if he had climbed down. So after what seemed to be an hour, he was calm and he finally climbed down, and his mind and heart still racing. He went to the front of the boulders just as the chief of the robbers did. And then he said the words, "Open sesame!" And sure enough, the boulders moved over and he saw this entrance open up in front of him. Cautiously, he entered inside within a moment. And as soon as he entered, the boulders moved back in their place, sealing the cave shut with him inside. There was some sunlight seeping through the top of the mountain very high up, but not something that someone could possibly climb over this high mountain. It was just impossible. It was a very, very high top up skylight. It was still dark, but just enough light to kind of make do and see what was around him. So he looked around, and what he saw was something that he had never been seen before. There were mountains of gold and silver coins, rubies and pearls and diamonds and rare gems, gold pots, carpets, silk and brocade garments, expensive and rare collections of anything worthy that he's ever known. It looked like generations of wealth looted and stored here by these thieves. He quickly grabbed a few handfuls of gold coins and stashed them in his little satchel that he had. He went back to the boulders where he entered from and said, "Open sesame!" And the boulders obeyed. He walked outside in the bright sunlight and diligently turned around and said the words, "Shut sesame!" to seal the cave back up again. His heart and mind were racing more than ever before. He just hit the jackpot. He and his wife could finally have a life of luxury. He wouldn't have to toil so much and pinch pennies. He made sure the boulders were closed and tried to pry with his hands to see if they moved, but they didn't move even a fraction of an inch. Clearly, the only way to enter in this cave was through these magical words. Happily, he covered his satchel full of gold coins that he packed in his saddle, and to make it look like it wasn't anything special, where his townfolk or neighbors would suspect of anything unusual on his donkeys. So he quickly went off back to his home. Once he got to his home in his front yard, he unloaded some of the firewood that he heaped onto the donkeys before he found the gold, and he rushed inside with his satchel to find his wife. He closed the doors behind him, and as he asked his wife to do the same to the windows. He then handed over the satchel to his wife. And she felt it first, and she was just confused about this whole behavior. What is going on by him? He's acting kind of weird, her husband. And then she felt the satchel. It felt like kind of like some sort of coins. And then she opened to see what was inside and saw inside gleaming bright yellow filled with gold. Upon seeing that, she was obviously in shock. Where could her husband possibly have come across all this gold? After she got over the initial shock, she gasped at her husband. How did you find these? And then she started to fear what immoral crime her husband committed to find these in his possession. She started to go off on him, oh my God, we're going to get in so much trouble. What is this? What did you do? Who did you rob? What did you steal? And then he told her, calm down, and he told her about the entire story and all that had taken place in the jungle. His wife was reassured that, okay, taking something from these thieves wasn't so much of a sin, since it was already stolen from other innocent folk. So she kind of talked herself into, okay, maybe this is not something wrong if we took something from something that was already stolen. Then she kept examining these coins in disbelief. Like, she's never seen gold coins in her life, let alone hold so many of them in her palm. Then AliBaba wanted to hide this treasure immediately. He didn't want anybody to suspect, how did they come across this, treasure of gold? Like, people would just start to suspect them. And he tells his wife, how many times, woman, are you going to look at these coins? They're real. And, we have to put them away before anybody in our community finds out. Then she says, how about we weigh these to exact the value of this gold? I really want to know how much these could be worth. Okay, he agrees. And, but they didn't have any measuring scales. They weren't rich enough to have anything worthy to measure in scales. So then she says, how about I go to your brother Kasim next door and ask if we can borrow his? He has several of them lying around his house since he's a merchant in trade. AliBaba agrees. And so AliBaba's wife, she goes over to Kasim's house, but she doesn't find him, and she finds his wife, Kasim's wife, there instead. So her sister-in-law. She says to her sister-in-law, do you think you can lend me your scales for a few moments? In response, Kasim's wife says, sure. Which ones do you need, the big ones or the small ones? AliBaba's wife responds, oh, just the small ones will do, please. Kasim's wife was a cunning sort of woman. She was so curious why in the world her husband's poor brother and his wife would have need for measuring scales. They didn't own anything of value that required measuring. So Kasim's shrewd wife, she goes inside and finds the small scales. What she does is, before going back outside to her sister-in-law or AliBaba's wife, what she does to the scales is applies a waxy, sticky substance to the bottom of the scales, hoping that whatever they're measuring would end up sticking to the scales, and she would have an inkling of what's going on in this household. Like, why do they need these measuring scales all of a sudden? So then she hands over the scales to AliBaba's unsuspecting wife. After AliBaba and his wife finish measuring the gold, they bury it inside their home and cover it up with the dirt. And then AliBaba's wife, takes the scales back to Kasim's house, not knowing that one of the gold coins got stuck to the bottom of the scales on that sticky substance. She hands over, unknowingly, the scales back to Kasim's wife, her sister-in-law, and then she goes back home. Then Kasim's wife, this cunning woman, obviously finds the gold coin and is raging with jealousy on how much gold could they have come across that they needed to use scales to measure instead of just counting the coins by hand. She anxiously then waits for her husband Kasim to get home that day. She can't wait to tell him what is going on. And when he does come home, she tells him about his brother hiding gold from him, igniting this jealousy in Kasim's heart towards his brother. And she says things like, "Your brother must have so much wealth now, way more than you. We sit here and count the gold with our hands, while your brother just heaps them onto these scales. You go around town and telling everybody and that you're rich and everybody thinks you're the successful and wealthy man, where your brother is outdoing you right under your nose and you don't even know it." And Kasim was agitated and couldn't sleep the whole night. And he was just raging again with jealousy, like how did his brother come upon this gold? And at the crack of dawn, he rushes over to AliBaba, his brother's house, to confront him. How dare he hide something, pretends that AliBaba's poor all this time, where in fact he had all this gold. And so what does Kasim do next when he goes to AliBaba's house? Okay, I think we're going to have to stop here. I know, don't hate me, but this story gets interesting, and I don't want to keep you guys longer past so many 15 or so minutes. But let's continue this tomorrow and see what happens. What does Kasim do to his brother AliBaba? All right, you guys should go to sleep now if it's late, and talk to you tomorrow. By the way, if you are having trouble sleeping, listen to any of those soundtracks that I made with hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. My favorite is The Dishwasher so far. So check it out and see you tomorrow, or hear me tomorrow, listen to you tomorrow. But in the meanwhile, send me comments. Tell me what you guys are thinking about the story so far. All right. Bye, guys.